Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about eventually tonight. It has to do with all this. And I'm going to mention a few times, each of these circles I like to think of as gears in a Swiss watch. And when I talk to the younger kids, they don't know what a Swiss watch is or what gears are because everything's digital. So you use your phone. But if you think of a watch, and there might be 30 gears in there, each one, like these two, or this one and this one, the gears mesh. But if this gear is jammed up and not spinning freely, it can affect the gear on the end. Because if that isn't moving freely, nothing is moving freely. So when you're thinking of these pathways and genetics, you want to sort of step way back and look more globally, because we don't want to treat the gene SNPs. If you have the who's heard of the MTHFR? Okay, that's the real big one. That you don't methylate folic acid, and we need folic acid to be alive. So you would think if somebody has the gene SNP, and I'll be defining what SNPs are, but there's a corruption in their gene that can affect this cycle, which doesn't allow you to methylate folic acid. So if we gave you methylated folic acid, you should feel much better. And a lot of people do. But there's a whole group of people that they start taking it for weeks or months, and they're feeling better, and all of a sudden they start feeling worse. And how can that possibly be? The body's finally getting something it needs that it can't make, and it's feeling worse. And that's because if the cycle isn't working right, and you substitute for it, but that feeds into another cycle, and nature doesn't waste anything. So what this cycle makes, that end product is used for the next cycle. So if the next cycle or 2 cycles down is jammed up, you eventually are just moving that load down a little bit further. Come on in, hi.
Yes.
And you jam up further, and I'll show you how that happens a little later on in the lecture. Okay, the basic premise for methyl genetic nutrition, which is what we're talking about tonight, is that our diet, toxins in the environment, genetic variants, our DNA, can cause a decrease in nutrients being either absorbed or used in the body, and a buildup of toxic material in the body, which gums up those gears. The genetic variants in our DNA we can now test for. But again, what you want to do is not look at a single variant, or I have this variant, I need to take that. You want to look at how everything is intertwined. How are you doing? What are your symptoms? What do your labs say? Because you could have the genetic variant and your body could be working through it and you don't need support there. So we're not treating SNPs or genetic variants. We're trying to help the person, the whole system. There's 2 words that are really coming out now, genetics and epigenetics. Genetics is our gene, genetics is our gene, our genes, and epigenetics is how we have an effect on those genes, our diet, our lifestyle, the toxins in the environment. And what I find very interesting, and I'll try to keep moving so I don't block everyone for certain people most of the time. You could have identical twins, and identical twins have the exact same genetic makeup, and they could live on opposite ends of the country, different lifestyles, different stress levels, and different toxins in the environment and what they're eating. And one of them could develop a condition, and the other one doesn't. And if the genetic material is identical, how could one of them have a problem and the other one not? Because they're mirror images of each other. And the reason is something in their lifestyle or diet or environment, they had a genetic weakness and something allowed that to be triggered. And they're doing studies now and they're finding a lot of times if you clean up the mess you're helping make, you can turn that switch back off. As long as you get that done before things are damaged and broken down at the cellular level. And going back to this chart, all this is going on in the mitochondria in every single cell in our body. That's really where everything happens. That's where we make our neurotransmitters. That's where we make our hormones. That's where we, for the methylation, that's where we methylate things. That's where a lot of our neurotransmitters are made. That's where the adrenals make adrenaline and cortisol. That's where the thyroid hormones are made. It's right down at the cellular level. And we can have a good effect on our cellular metabolism, or we can really mess it up. So, has anyone had their DNA tested or had any DNA testing? Okay. There's a whole bunch of companies out there that do it. And there's also on the medical side, they can test with your genes, and they're looking at the COMT genes to look at different pathways for certain drugs. Because if you have a double SNP, if you might have a problem in this pathway, they can tell the different drugs, let's say it's an antidepressant, some of them might use that pathway exclusively, and there might be other antidepressants that don't use that pathway. So this is a good thing we can use the DNA for, so we can narrow down maybe a better choice of a drug so you'll have less side effects. And so it's really interesting things, but the problem and the caution is it's not a slam dunk for most things. It's not, you have this SNP, take that. It doesn't work that easy. And so what's happening is people are getting, if they're doing something like a 23andMe analysis, and then you can get the dump of the full analysis, which was about 6,000 SNPs, different genes, and you look at this printout and it's all numbers and letters, what does it mean? It has to be put into a program that links it to the different enzymes, and then it starts making more sense. And that's what we can do now, which is great. So the goal is to help the mind and the body function better, and to help the body clean up the mess, the toxic mess that poor metabolism in our body down at the cellular level causes. So it's not just adding in supplements. A lot of times you've been making the wrong metabolic waste product because those gears aren't working right, and it's that bad or the wrong metabolic end product that's gumming up the works. And so cleaning that up can accomplish it, as opposed to taking something to treat it. Okay, so people are learning about genetics. They're getting a lot of help, and they're getting very confused. And I talked about treating genes. Okay, I'm going to show you in a little bit. There's another gene, MTHFR, and that has to do with a methylation product. And I'm going to show you how that gene, you could have the MTHFR, that means you don't methylate B12. You've heard of methyl B12?
Yeah.
And okay, that's the form of B12 that the body uses. And if you have that gene, if you just read the gene, it would say you probably can't make methyl B12. And in the compounding room, we make methyl B12 for injection. And there are some people that get a dose of methyl B12. You check their blood level. The blood level was very low. They get the methyl B12 and they feel worse. And I'll show you why, and I even have a lab to show you. There are other genes that affect the methylation of B12. So you could have that SNP and the body could be making enough, and you're fine. Or you could have that, not have the MTHFR, and have a couple of the other lesser genes that affect the methylation of B12, and you could be really deficient in it. So again, you have to look bigger, not just, oh, this one's off, I need to do that. There's a couple of supplement manufacturers that will take some of your genetic results, and for free they put it in their program, and they tell you which products to take. But they don't know anything about you, they don't have any lab values, and you don't know whether that pathway is working or not. So that's more of a sale item to sell their products. So as you go through this, if you have a good analysis done, it can be over 500,000 pieces of genetic information that's analyzed. And how do you deal with that? Who can, in their brain, can deal with 600,000 pieces of information and map it all out? That's what computers are for. And there's some good programs in there that start putting it together for us. There's also different tests that are available now to look at it from the other end, from what the body is excreting. Because if we know if pathway A is working right, this product should come out in the urine. And if it isn't working right, this is what we make. You can collect the urine, analyze it, and if you have too much of this product, that's a definite that pathway needs some help. So there's a test, the organic acid test. There's a Nutrival test, which does the organic acids, plus it checks your vitamins and minerals and a lot of the bacteria, or the output from the bacteria. So it's exciting times. Everyone doesn't need to do these tests, but the people who do need it, there's a lot of really good quality, useful information that we can use and design something to help clean up your mess. Not, if you have this SNP, everybody does this. This is a very individual type thing, because all of our lifestyles are different, and all of our genetics are different, and our diets, our epigenetics is different, our diet are different. Our diet and our exercise and the toxins we're exposed to, and all that really factors in. The company that I've been studying with, it's a research company. What I really like about them is they get all this information, your symptomology, your genes, if you have labs done, if we need the organic acid, all that gets put in, it's analyzed, and then about a 50 to 80 page report comes out. Not saying, this is the problem, this is what you have to do. That's more information for the practitioner to then put into the picture of you and what's going on with you, lifestyle, health-wise, and then a protocol is put together. What I love about the company that I study with now is they charge a flat fee to do this analysis the first time, but they want cases, they want live cases. And so as they find more matches and more gene combinations by the large number of cases they have, that these people seem to have the same problem, and they have these 8 gene SNPs. Instead of they were looking at 4, now they found there's 8 involved. They're automatically updating everyone's report at no charge. So they're up to, I think, 65,000 cases and growing. And that's what I like, because what we know today is so much more than what we knew 2 months ago. But 6 months from now, it's going to look like the Dark Ages, because as they're gathering data and looking at things, they're finding out so much more. So the premise of methyl genetics and analyzing genes is, I already talked about that, is you start off with a saliva test. It's either a swab or a cheek, or you spit in a vial and fill the vial up. Fill out, there's an online symptomology questionnaire, because if you have a SNP and certain pathways aren't working well, odds are you're going to have these symptoms. So they're not just looking at the genes, they're looking at the genes and how you feel, what's going on. If we need more information, we do the organic acids, neurotransmitter, hormone testing, all that factors in. And a lot of people already have hormone tests or neurotransmitter tests. And then a customized protocol is put together. Another interesting thing is, it's not a one-shot deal, because the protocol is put together at the beginning. It's cleaning up the mess and getting some of the pathways working more efficiently. And if we all do our job right, if you clean up some areas that need to be cleaned up in your life and eat better and exercise better and get more sleep and hopefully less stress, what will happen is you're not going to need that much support going forward. So your protocol, what you start with, is to get all those gears working better. And as they're working better, you may need to be on B12, the folic acid. But a lot of what you needed to take to clean up the mess, once it's cleaned up, you don't have to keep cleaning up the mess because the machinery is working better and you're not generating the mess. So I'll say it's a commitment, but it isn't really a commitment. It's you should want to move forward. I'm a mess today. I'm better a few months from now, and I'm even better. I should have a different protocol if I'm in much better health or cleanliness than I am now. Does that make sense? Okay. I get my fingers to work right. Okay, so the more information you have, and the deeper now with the genes, the deeper we can go right down to the mitochondria, you have a better chance of hitting the nail on the head the first time out. You're not guessing. Try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this. And that's basically how a lot of people have been treating things is really trial and error. Does everything work perfectly 100% of the time? No. That would be wonderful, but nothing is 100%. But what's very interesting is if something doesn't work, and it should, that gives us a lot of good information too. And we have to go back to all the different pathways, and there's a pathway that's jammed up that isn't allowing what we're trying to do to work. So even a negative response can be a very positive response. This is Bob Miller. He is the head researcher. I was going to call him a geek, and he calls himself a geek. But he started doing this right at the beginning of mapping the genome. And he said his wife is yelling at him. He's up till 3, 4 in the morning. And every time they find another link, he's busy going back through all the cases and saying, too bad we didn't know that then, but we know it now, we can get that straightened out. But what was interesting from the genetic research that they did and the cases as they were building them up, he found a link for people who have chronic Lyme that are doing everything right and getting treated for it supposedly properly, which it is properly, but they're not getting better. He found different genetic patterns that were very similar for a lot of these people. So he started going through all the cases, and they did the Alleles study, a Lyme study, one. They finished their second study, and they're on the third, and they won at the Alleles in Helsinki. They won the award for the best Lyme research of the year, and that was on the genetics side. Since then, they're now looking at autism and a few other conditions because they're just finding with these large numbers, when you know what to look for, you can start finding patterns. So they're getting all the people with autism that have done this, and they're comparing this 602,000 pieces of information, finding patterns, and they're not sure what it means, but if that pattern is in almost every single person that has autism, it has to mean something. So now they're looking at the metabolic pathways and working their way backwards. So we're really in the infancy stage, but it's really fascinating. They're also now doing a study, so they're doing the Lyme, autism, and at the end I'm going to be presenting a little bit of the information they came up with on histamine. And we think of histamine as allergies, but histamine affects just about every tissue and organ in our body. There's a lot to do with gluten sensitivity. There's a lot of statistics now coming out that people with a histamine issue, a processing issue, celiac, they have a much higher incidence of celiac and all that. And with some of the research that was done, it really makes sense why that is, and I'll show you some of that. So now you have a copy of the pyramid, and the reason I put this here is, the analogy I use with the digestive system is a river. Any of you that have been in my gut lectures know. Starts at the snow cap, a river, begins at the snow cap, it goes to the tributaries, to the streams, to the body of the river, and then dumps into Boston Harbor if you're around here. Think of a river that has 3 or 4 dams in it. So the water's flooding all these different areas, and you want to get the water flowing properly. Do you start opening up the dam upstream, or do you start at the one closest to Boston Harbor?
Boston Harbor.
Right. So you start downstream and get the lower part of the river flowing. Then you find the next blockage, open that up and let that flow and work your way up. It takes a little time, but you get the river flowing better, much faster. Same thing on this end. If you look on your chart, gluten sensitivity, dairy problems, peanut, histamine, imbalances in probiotics, some enzyme deficiencies, and some very, very potent oxidants or free radicals in the body. That all has to be cleared up before you can do any of the other work. The genetic testing might tell you you need to do something about folic acid, B12, or methylation. That's the last thing you do. Because if you start doing this, you are opening up the dam at the very top of the river, and everything's going to come down, hit the next dam, and the person's going to tank. And that's why some people, when they get glutathione, B12, or methylfolate, feel better at first, and then tank, because it starts flowing down, and there's a dam further downstream that you haven't opened up. So the better way to do it, and it's really the only healthy way to do it, start at the bottom and work up. And realistically, to oversimplify it, someone's a couch potato eating processed fast foods, not exercising, not drinking enough water, drinking too much alcohol, too much caffeine, and they feel terrible. What could a supplement possibly do for them? It's a waste of money and time. Whereas if you clean up their lifestyle and diet, even small changes, they're going to notice a huge change. Then you put in the nutrients and the body runs with it. We have a wonderful machine that wants to be healthy. And that's why using some good vitamins or herbs or even homeopathy, a lot of times people can't believe how well they feel, how much better they feel, how fast. And that's because the body's crying for help. And if you give the body what it's looking for, it's a great machine nature gave us, and it will fly. Problem is, if we don't help it in time, eventually things break. And that's when you go from pre-diabetes to a diabetic. Or your cholesterol is up, and eventually you have blockages and you need open heart surgery and things like that. But until you get one step away from that, you can move much healthier. You just have to work with the body. Okay, so going back to my enemy from college and my friend now, if we think of each of these as meters and they all have to flow, here's the MTHFR. This is the year where we methylate folic acid, and we need that. Very interesting, we need B12 for this methylation of folic acid to work. With B12, the methionine homocysteine cycle has to work right. So just doing something here, if you have a problem here, isn't going to work. And now is when a few of you might fall asleep. I'm going to try to keep it surface and simple. So all these pathways have to work properly. This is a real big one, and we know on the medical side, they say if your homocysteine level is high, take B6, B12, and folic acid, and that helps lower homocysteine. And we prove that by labs and all that, but it was never explained why does that work. Just it does, and why not do it? You know, those vitamins can't hurt you. But if we think about it, is folic acid, is B12, and B6 is used in these years. So if you're low in those nutrients, you can't convert homocysteine. This is supposed to go back and forth, back to methionine. So you're just making homocysteine. And when you have too much homocysteine, it comes down this pathway, which it should only trickle, but it's a flood going down here. And you make ammonia, you use up your glutathione, you make a lot of glutamate, which is anxiety provoking. A lot of people with anxiety problems and sleep problems, they're not converting their glutamate to GABA. And if you look at the different lines, that affects nitric oxide. Nitric oxide we need for our heart, for blood pressure. Nitric oxide is what Viagra and Cialis work on. And a lot of people take Viagra or Cialis and they have no effect at all. That's most of the time because they're not making or recycling enough nitric oxide. So you're giving something that pushes that pathway, but the pathway isn't working. And maybe the sexual dysfunction, the erectile dysfunction, and a lot of the fertility issues we have are due to too much stress and anxiety, which can be due to too much glutamate, which could be due to some of this not working well, and we're just trying to push that. But this not working is making that not work. That isn't the problem. That's the side effect. So if we get this working, we could fix another problem. So I went into that just to show you it's not A has a direct line to B. I'm going to show you a little later how these two cycles affect this cycle, which is how we make serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, all of our neurotransmitters. So there's a lot going on in every single cell in our body, and now that we've mapped the DNA and we know some of the SNPs, what they control, there's a lot we can do. And I forgot to mention, all these squares or rectangles are all enzymes, and our genes are responsible for making the enzymes properly. And if we don't have the enzymes working well, we can't make the products that the enzyme is supposed to make, and then it gums up the works.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So in order for homeocysteine, if your homeocysteine is high, you take B6, B12, and folate.
Correct.
If you can't methylate, you have to take B12 that's methylated and folate
and
that's methylated.
Correct. And a lot of these supplement companies make specific products that have all the those methylated vitamins in it. And realistically, just like with vitamin B12, there's been cyanocobalamin on the market forever. When methylcobalamin came out, it was very expensive, so they were both on the market. But now the quality companies are using methylcobalamin in all the supplements because the prices come down because it's in big demand and the volume's up. And why not use the methylated? If you can methylate, it's fine, and if you can't methylate it, it's fine. So why not just put it in there? But sometimes even knowing what you should take, if you take the wrong form of it, depending upon your genetic makeup, it's the same as not taking it. That was a good question.
Another question to you.
Yeah.
If you've had diagnosis of the MTHFR, does that also mean the MTHFR was done at the same time? Or
It depends. Some of the question was if you tested MTHFR, and I love all these acronyms, does that mean they tested some of the other ones? It depends. If you're doing a comprehensive one, they check a whole lot. But now, for insurance, just like when you go to a lab, they can check off MTHFR, and that could be the only one. Or the COMT for the neurotransmitters and some of the drugs. So it all depends upon, just like with the thyroid, they could just do TSH, or they could do the whole panel, or any part of the panel. So it's all new, and a lot of people don't understand the difference. They're just looking for the 3 or 4 big ones. But I'll show you on the report at the end, just on B12, there's like 7 different genes that can affect your B12, not just the MTHFR.
When you say a lot of people don't understand, you're talking about the general doctors, like the primary doctor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And part of it is it's all new, and it's not just reading an article, it's hundreds of hours of studying, because you're down to each of these is a separate pathway. And so to put the whole picture together, you're talking...
You need a biochemist.
Yeah, that wants to really look at it. So I separated out for you good guys and the bad guys. In our body, nutrient-filled food is very important. SOD is an enzyme that breaks down superoxide, which over here, superoxide and peroxynitrite are 2 free radicals that our body makes normally in small amounts, and our body uses an enzyme SOD and a few other enzymes. It uses also BH4 to break it down. When this is gummed up, we're making way too much of this, and that's what causes most of the inflammation and damage in our body at the cellular level. So superoxide dismutase is the enzyme, catalase is another one, glutathione, SAMe, NADH, nitric oxide, choline, having balanced neurotransmitters. These are all very helpful to the body. This is what's killing us and ruining us. High histamine, zonulin I'll be talking about, homocysteine, the superoxide free radical, affecting nitric oxide, the enzyme that helps make nitric oxide, ammonia, sulfates and sulfites, excess glutamate. These are all just gumming up all those gears. So these are the things we have to, the mess we have to clean up, and these are the things we have to make sure you have enough of so we don't keep making the mess. Does that make sense? Okay. So a lot of people have already done a test, you probably saw it on TV, 23andMe. For $99, they'll test about 6,000 genes, and they give you an ancestry report, so you can find out where your relatives or where your ancestors are from. We found out in our family somebody has 0.001% more Neanderthal than the rest of the family. And so, of course, that person is getting a lot of ribbing, dragging. But it is very interesting. Their $200 report gave you a little bit of the health side on the MTHFR, the MTHFR, things like that. And what we were using it for was they also gave you a raw data dump, a zip file of all 6,000 gene SNPs. That data in the zip file we could import right into the program to analyze them. 23andMe, I love them, I did it myself and my whole family. About 3 weeks ago, they changed, they call it a chip. They changed what they're testing and they eliminated about 3,000 of the genes. So they're expanding their ancestry report and doing much less on the medical side. That was a business decision because Ancestry.com caught up to them in sales. So they realized the public is more interested in ancestry than the raw data. So what I think they should have done was had 3 levels: ancestry, medical, and if you want the dump, charge even more. But they dumbed it down. So the companies that are doing the in-depth analysis were caught with their pants down, and also a lot of patients or clients that spent $200 to get this real big report from 23andMe. When they got it, it was this big. And 23andMe said, oh, well, we changed what we're doing. It's on the website, so you should have looked before you sent it in. What the other companies are doing is they went to some of the genetic testing companies and they said, this is what we want to test. You don't have to put up a report, you don't have to do anything. We just want the raw data for these genes, and we want to have the ability to add more genes as we discover what we need. And it looks like they found 2 companies that are going to put a test together specifically for them, and they're hoping mid to the end of October. So if anyone has done 23andMe and had it processed at least 3 weeks ago or earlier, that's great data that we can use. Anyone that does it now, you're getting ancestry report, which is interesting and fun, but there's very little usable data there. But that is changing. It's just going to be like a month delay. So you get, however you do it, you get your data, you put it into the software, it can be updated directly. That genetic information gives us areas to look at. And then, like I said before, we take the labs you've already had run, your thyroid labs, your female or male hormone labs, neurotransmitters. If we need it, the organic acid test to see what's coming out, and we can work back up. And all that goes in with your symptomology. And then we have an idea of maybe certain things that aren't working. Then sitting down with you sit down with your practitioner and really figure out what's going on and where on the river, where your specific dams are. All this gives us guidance, but it's not a definite roadmap. because we're all different. And you could have the SNPs, but your body could have figured out a way around it. Someone else could not have the SNP, and they might not be methylating folic acid properly because of something else. So this helps open up the windows for us. This is what the genetic data looks like. So looking at that, that tells us a lot if you know what you're looking at. But so on this, imagine having a printout of 7,000 of these, and then you say, okay, I spent $200 for that. Thank you very much, and you can use it to light fires or whatever. So now we'll talk about what's going on at the genetic end of the genes. Just get my notes. I usually don't do it this way, but I want to make sure I don't start talking and put you to sleep going way too deep, because sometimes it's hard if somebody hasn't been exposed to it to not go too deep. And I want to go as deep as we can go, but I don't want you all, of course I don't want you to fall asleep. Okay, the DNA 101. DNA controls everything. It's how you make your nutrients, your neurotransmitters, your hormones, your energy. It helps activate or methylate the vitamins. It's how you clear toxins out of your body. It's the roadmap of how you make your antioxidants. We think of antioxidants as vitamins. We take them. In reality, our body should be able to handle all the free radicals that we generate. And if we're eating a good diet, we shouldn't need to take anything. Problem is, our life is too stressed, the environment's too dirty, we've screwed up the machinery, and the food doesn't have everything we need in it. So we do need to supplement on antioxidants, but our body makes the most important ones, and a lot of us through genetics or the gears being jammed up, we're not making it. So we're just generating all these free radicals, which causes us to age, and that causes us to eventually have real problems. And if you think about it, there's a lot of people, if you are hanging around with peers your own age, well, I guess they would be if they're your peers, but some people, you go to a high school reunion, some people look phenomenal, and some people look like 95 years old. And that's lifestyle and genetics, but it's the stress and the free radicals that are aging us. When you go out in the sun, the skin generates free radicals, and that's why people who sunbathe, the old days with the baby oil and the reflectors and all that, they have leathery skin. That was free radicals that were generated, damaged the protein, the tissue. And that's going on inside our body. And that cycle, the map of all the cycles that I showed you, help clean up that mess and protect us. So when that isn't working, we age faster, we have inflammation, we can have blood sugar problems, neurotransmitter problems, hormone imbalances. And it's not just because of genetics, it's because of our lifestyle, the epigenetics. The nutritional DNA testing helps us determine how to help you with supplements. What supplements do you need now? What supplements do you need as we clean up the mess? And it helps compensate for nutritional deficiencies, and most important, it helps break up and clean up the toxins that our body is generating because our metabolism isn't running right. It's like your car not running right, you're putting out a lot of pollution out of the tailpipe. And so we want to get the engine tuned up. So DNA, this is our cell. In the nucleus, we have our chromosomes, which are made up of, it's a spiral, it's all twisted like a fishing line, and you twist it and it all coils on each other. Inside there, we have our chromosomes and we have our genes. So there's different bases that are supposed to be matched together. And I like to think of it, remember way back when the first computer came out and they tried to explain to us there's a washer with two wires going through it, and depending upon how the electricity flows, it's either a 0 or a 1. And if you have the right combinations of 0 and 1s, that's still how it works. That's how our computers work. And so I understand what I have to do to get the computer to work, but I can't wrap my mind around 0s and 1s, and billions of combinations of these flipping around is what actually makes the computer think. Our genes, there's certain combinations of these bases, and that's what is the blueprint for the cells to make what they're supposed to make and to divide and grow and make new cells that are proper. And so that's in every single nucleus of every single cell in our body. So adenine and thymine, the A and the T, are supposed to bond together, and the cytosine and guanine bond together. And if that happens in the right combination, and this, let's say this is the MTHFR segment, if all these are correct, you don't have any problem methylating folic acid or whatever the gene is. But every once in a while, instead of this being a cysteine, it might be an A or a T, and that's called the SNP. And the SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism, and that's why I'm glad they call it SNP. It's a lot easier to remember. They occur in coding regions, non-coding regions, in between the genes. So not every SNP causes a problem, but there's a lot of SNPs that can cause problems, and there's a whole lot of them that we know they're there, but we haven't figured out what they do yet, because you can't, in a person, flip it the other way. Your genes are your genes. So you might have heard of a heterozygous SNP and a homozygous SNP. Heterozygous SNPs are, one of these is wrong. The homozygous means both of them are wrong. Okay? So if you have testing done, you might find out you have a C699, which is one of the ones that they're all testing for, and it'll say it's heterozygous or homozygous. And so you'll know if it says heterozygous, only one of the parts is wrong. If it's homozygous, both parts are wrong. That means you got it from both parents. And what's interesting, when we did it, I've had bad allergies my whole life since I was a little kid. And my wife has no allergies, or very little. So she has one SNP, I have both SNPs, and my son got hammered because he got everything from both of us. So when we had that done, I wanted to call him up and apologize. I love him, I'm sorry. But Dr. Miller said to me, everyone gets the material from the parents. It is what it is, but isn't it wonderful? Now you know what's going on and you know what to do to help them, not antihistamines, but how to get the body to process histamine better. So it took me a little while to wrap my head around that. But
Gary, what's the CT and the GAD?
Okay, it's guanine, adenine, cysteine. It's the different nitrogenous bases that make up the genes. Okay, they're molecules in the genes.
So those are the components.
Those are the components of the gene segment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. There's 3 billion pairs of these in human DNA, and nobody has a perfect DNA. And I'm sure there's somebody out there trying to make a perfect human. It'll never happen from the DNA side. It's just too many variables. Okay, then there's an allele. An allele is an expression of the gene when there's a SNP. So really, I put this in here, you really don't need to know that. But if you have one SNP that's wrong, that's one allele. It's still the same gene, but there's all different combinations in that gene, and they're called alleles, if that ever comes up. Okay, so some SNPs account for the color of our hair. If you have male pattern baldness, if you're going to gray early, if you're tall, if you're short, if you're overweight, if you have a problem, all sorts of health problems are related to the SNPs. Others affect how we develop diseases, how we metabolize drugs in our body. I mentioned that earlier. With, I forget how many different combinations there are, right now, the majority of them we don't think have any effect on our health. But as we find more combinations, just like with the methylating B12,
we used to think it was the the MTRR. Now we realize there's 6 or 8 other genes that also affect it. So as research goes on, we're going to find a lot of these genes that we thought didn't do anything really have an effect when they're combined with other genes. Okay, so we inherit the different alleles from our mother and father, and depending upon what's in each person's genetic makeup, there's all sorts of combinations. And that's why, it's very interesting. If you look at most families, you could have 3 or 4 kids, and each kid is totally different. And it's from the same 2 pieces of genetic material. But that's because of the different alleles that are made, depending upon which part of the gene came over in the sperm and the egg. So it's confusing, but it is pretty fascinating when you think about it. I had, growing up, one of people in school, they had 13 kids. So there must have been some problem with the alleles in the brain of the parents who kids. But each of the kids was totally different, and I would say half of them, if you line them up, you would swear they weren't even from the same family. And that's because there's so many possible combinations. Okay, MTHFR is position C677. That's why it's called, in a lot of the reports, the C677 gene. They also, the DNA is one big long piece of string. Each of these is called a rung, so they even give the rung number. So if you ever had trouble falling asleep, you could map out your DNA, count down, 1,801 rungs, and you'd know that's where the C677 gene is. But, so that's the MTHFR encoding portion of it. If you have a test done, a lot of times they'll say it's a C677 heterozygous or homozygous, and now you know what that means. How many SNPs are there, 1 or 2? And are they identical or different? So the genetic patterns, along with labs and symptoms, help us figure out is it a nutritional deficiency or a metabolic waste buildup that's causing the problem. So we might need to supplement with something to help break down the superoxide, or to get more methylfolate or B12 or trimethylglycine. That's a methyl donor. Or we might have to clean up some extra ammonia, peroxynitrite, homocysteine, and for that we call them scavenger products. Their purpose is to help clean up the mess. And once you get the mess cleaned up, then you can hopefully get the engine running right so you're not making the mess anymore. So from mom and dad, if they have a heterozygous gene, so they have one of the right components and one of the wrong ones, they have a SNP there. If they each have one, you have, going to here, 25% chance that there'll be a homozygous defect, 25% that there'll be no defect, and 50% they'll have a heterozygous. If both parents are homozygous, this is wrong, they both have the SNP on both of them, 100% of the kids are going to have it. And so that's why, going back, most of the time, this person could be normal on both, this person could have one, and that's why all the kids are different, because the odds of everyone getting the exact same gene components is different. But that's also, I think, probably wonderful. It makes each of us unique. But it's also terrible because you could have 2 people, same problems, and the therapy will be totally different because of their genes, because of the genes affect the enzymes which affect the pathways. So the MTHFR, we used to think it was so simple. Now is the MTHFR C677T, and it could be heterozygous or homozygous. So if you have genetic testing done and that comes up, you can explain it to your practitioner. The other thing that's very, very important is we used to think if you have the gene SNP that the gene is not working. And that doesn't hold water. if you have a heterozygous SNP for the MTHFR, that means the efficiency of you methylating it, folic acid, may be 20 to 30% down. If you're homozygous, it may be 60 to 80% down, but it may only be 5% down. So again, it's not a carved in stone that if you have a homozygous SNP that you aren't methylating and you have to take it. And so again, you want to look at labs, you want to look at symptoms, not just raw numbers. Because that's what we used to do in mainstream medicine. If you couldn't find out what was wrong with someone, let's just throw every single lab test we can find. If we find a number that's off, what can we do to force it up or down to normal and you're cured? The better question is, what can we do to help the body normalize that and make the right amount, as opposed to what can we do to force it? So we're back to our Fermi chart, and if you look on the chart, I didn't put everything in, but B12, if let's say your MTR and MTRR and everything is working right, lead inhibits the methylation of B12. Aluminum inhibits BH4 to BH2, which affects nitric oxide non-neurotransmitters. So we have to look at, if this isn't working, or this isn't working, do we just need to put in a supplement? Or is it that the body can't use it because of a heavy metal toxicity? So there's all these different layers. So we have to really step back and look at a big picture and then zero in, not go right down to an enzyme and say, oh, that's my problem, I just have to take the methylated form or whatever. Okay, what is the SNP going to do? It can change the enzyme, it can do nothing, and it can also lessen the efficiency of a pathway, but your body can compensate for that a lot of times unless there are epigenetic things going on. Your diet, your lifestyle, you're very stressed, you're not sleeping, you're not drinking enough water, things build up in the body, and if you have the SNP, you have a greater chance of that pathway not working, and you're stacking up the deck to what can I do to make that pathway stop working. So what you have to do is clean up what you're doing, and the pathway can start working better. So again, it isn't just take this for that. Also, the SNPs can cause an enzyme pathway to slow down and not be as efficient. And I'm not sure slide-wise where I am, but I'll show you on the CBS BHMT area with the going from methionine to homocysteine back to methionine. That pathway, if you have the SNP, it makes it run even faster. It makes you make more homocysteine. So instead of slowing down, so each one is different. Some of them are accelerating, which can be good or bad, and some SNPs slow it down, which could be good or bad. So it's really a chess game. There's so many pieces. You can't just focus on this move. You have to look at the whole game. So a person who's hetero or homozygous, the enzyme should be converting substance A into substance B. But if it doesn't do it efficiently, it could be making substance C, which is the toxic thing in the body that we have to use the scavenger stuff to clear up the mess. So you want to clear up the mess that's corrupting this even more, and is there a way we can make this work better? And a lot of times you can get the machinery running better, and a lot of times once you clean up the mess, it might be a supplement you need for the rest of your life. If everything's working and you do not methylate B12, you need to take methyl B12. But like we showed with the percentages, you could have the SNP, and if you clean up the machinery and clean up the waste product, you might be working with 50% efficiency, and that you might only need 40% efficiency, so you don't need to supplement. So it's really very interesting and very individual. So in summary, there are thousands of reactions occur per second in every single cell in our body DNA is the instructions, the roadmap of how the machinery is supposed to work. The SNPs in the DNA we inherit from our parents, and we can't hold them responsible. They have nothing to do with it. They got it from their parents. And that controls our reactions and dysfunctions in the body. And finding the SNPs and the results of the SNPs and the results of the toxic load, you can clean up the system pretty well. Can everyone be at 100%? No. Well, we don't need to be at 100%, but everyone can be better than they are. All right, histamine. Just going to do a little bit on that. It's fascinating now. Histamine we think of as allergies. You know, you're having a histamine problem. You're sneezing from the pollens of a dog or dust. There are mast cells in our blood that's where histamine is stored. When you need histamine, you're having an allergic reaction, the body releases histamine, it causes us to sneeze, runny eyes, the whole big mucus, and the function of that is to flush out the irritant. So being the brilliant people we are, what do? We take antihistamines, and they block the histamine receptor. The body's trying to clean out something that's harming it, and we're blocking it. So what does the body do? It makes twice as much histamine. And that's why a lot of people find if they take antihistamines continually, they get used to it or it stopped working. It's still working, except the body's smarter than we are, and it made enough histamine that it can defeat the blocking of the antihistamine. So, a couple of things we can do. One is you can take some supplements that help stabilize the mast cells. So you can have a histamine reaction, but instead of the floodgates opening up and you drowning in histamine and having all these problems, it helps modulate the histamine release. That's something like D-Hist. It has quercetin, stinging nettle, bromelain, and acetylcysteine for the mucus. It doesn't make you sleepy. You can take it with your antihistamines. You don't want to just stop your antihistamine because you're blocking and the body's trying to get in there. And if you all of a sudden stop the blocking, the body doesn't know that. So you get a flood of histamine and you have one of the worst sneezing fits or runny nose. You need to stabilize the mast cells, then back off slowly. There's also, we have enzymes in the body. The second problem is we have to make histamine and then we have to break it down and get rid of it. And a lot of us have a problem because of the gene SNPs that we don't make enough of the enzyme to break down histamine. So each time you're exposed to something, your histamine goes up and then it should come all the way down, but you don't have enough enzyme to break it down, so it doesn't come quite down to baseline. So then the next time you have a histamine reaction, it goes up and you just keep building till pretty soon you're having skin reactions, you're having hives all the time, you walk a lot of the chemically sensitive people, their histamine is just too high and they're not breaking it down in addition to not getting rid of the toxins. So what happens is somebody walks by that washed their clothes and used a bounce in the dryer, and just outside walking by and smelling the bounce is enough to throw them into a reaction. Another interesting thing, well, some of the functions of histamine, it's not just for allergies. It affects our immune response, digestion, inflammation, sexual function, blood pressure, muscle contraction, wakefulness, neurotransmitter usage. So histamine is very important. It's a neurotransmitter. So that's one of the reasons why when we take antihistamines, we get drowsy. We're not letting the body do what it should be doing with the histamine. Nice chart. These are all the effects histamine has. And on the skin, itching, flushing, have anaphylactic reactions, hypertension, vertigo, headaches, nausea. It affects the central nervous system. Over here, the GI tract, stomach cramps, diarrhea. It can have an effect for dysmenorrhea, respiratory tract, bronchoconstriction, congestion, of course, runny nose, sneezing. So histamine has many, many effects. And there's two different histamine receptors, 1 and 2. So if we take antihistamines, it can affect anything here because it's not a smart bomb.
So how about get the body dealing with histamine better instead of blocking it? I don't know if you can read this chart, but this is the same thing in a different format. But these are all the areas. Inflammation. Histamine can cause inflammation. It can cause anxiety or contribute to anxiety. It can affect your sleep. And we don't even think of that. It can affect your energy level. And it's really amazing stuff when we look a little bit deeper. So histamine breakdown is very important. You want to be able to release a lot to deal with a problem, but then you want to get rid of it. And I don't know if anyone is, there's an enzyme, DAO, diamine oxidase. And that, our gut, the small intestine, is supposed to make a lot of that because there's an awful lot of foods that are high in histamine, which if you eat them and the gut can't break down that histamine, it causes higher histamine in the body, which can contribute to allergic problems, to allergy problems. So there was a shortage of diamine oxidase, and it's now back on the market. So people who eat certain foods and have a histamine reaction, that's because the body isn't breaking it down fast enough. So taking the enzyme with those, you should cut back on the histamine foods, but sometimes you can't avoid them. It's now back on the market, and you can take it with the foods, tomatoes and peppers and all the nightshades. And online you can get a list of histamine foods. So that can be helpful. Stabilizing the mast cells internally is very helpful. There's also, we talk about scavengers. The histamine scavenger, very interesting if you look at the formulas, it's this product, or these ingredients, plus it has a lot for the gut. And the reason it has a lot for the gut, which we'll get to, talk about that. I'm talking and I got out of my slides. I'll get to this in a minute. When you eat certain foods that have histamine, or you don't break histamine down well, or internally your histamine level is too high, that causes inflammation in the gut. And they're finding when the histamine is there, it causes the body to release more a chemical called zonulin. Zonulin is very helpful for us, and it can be very harmful. The lining of our gut has one layer of epithelial of skin cells, and they're real tight together. And that's to keep all the bad bacteria and all the garbage in our bowel from getting into the bloodstream. When we eat, the body releases a little bit of zonulin, and it's like a glue solvent. And those joints open up just a little bit. The molecules that should get into our bloodstream get in, and then it slams shut and glues tight. When you have too much histamine, the body releases huge amounts of zonulin, and you have leaky gut. And when you have leaky gut, you're absorbing things you shouldn't. The immune system reacts to it, starts attacking it, which causes histamine to go up, which causes more zonulin, which feeds bowel inflammation and leaky gut. So that's the cycle they just figured out. And I have a couple slides on that. So I'll get back to that. I'm sorry I'm out of order. That's why I shouldn't go into notes and going through it. If we look at histamine intolerance, people who are always having histamine reactions, look at what it can cause. And I'm not going to read them all. Vertigo, difficulty falling asleep, you're napping, you're not getting into deep REM cycles, digestive upset, conjunctivitis, chest pain, itching, panic attacks, nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, flushing, hives, fatigue, tissue swelling, all due to histamine. And then we just dump more antihistamines. And then what do? Don't work unless take some steroids, which help temporarily and goof up all those gears even more. So zonulin, increased levels of zonulin may be a contributing factor in the development of a lot of studies going on. Histamine can be behind a lot of autoimmune diseases, celiac, insulin-dependent diabetes, MS, rheumatoid arthritis. We're not even looking at it. But a lot of these people, even if you just ask a simple question, are there any problems with allergies, seasonal allergies, or food reactions? And they all say yes.
but that's totally different. That doesn't affect B. We're talking A and Z, so they can't have any relation, but they do. High zonulin levels have been reported people with active celiac disease. Also, a new study just showed zonulin levels are elevated 2 to 5 years before diabetes and a lot of autoimmune conditions rear their heads. So, somebody missing the boat? No, this is new information. We didn't even know to look at it. But that's part of the genetic research that's showing us new rocks to look under.
Is that an enzyme there?
No, it's not an enzyme. It's I don't want to say it's a chemical the body makes, but it's a substance the body makes that dissolves the glue, so the cells open up a little bit wider.
How do you test for it?
There is a test, a blood test for zonulin. It's not a common test, and most practitioners probably won't do it because they don't know any. Rightfully so, it's new. But I think this is going to be hitting New England Journal of Medicine and a lot of the big publications real soon. Yes?
I believe, well, gluten is really the thing that stimulates zonulin too, and the
Absolutely.
main researcher was at Mass General for years. You might probably know.
Yeah.
But
So,
it's through like the gluten and
well,
sensitivity
correct.
stuff that zonulin.
that's people who react to gluten. A lot of it has to do with the zonulin, and you're correct. Thank you. I should have brought that up. And now histamine is a whole nother level on it. And histamine, gluten is something we're doing to ourselves. We have to eat it to get it. Histamine is something our bodies make. So if you have a gluten issue and a histamine issue, you're drowning in zonulin. And so again, there's a lot we can do epigenetics-wise on our diet and our lifestyle to help us. So in summary, zonulin is produced in the small intestines. It's part of an inflammatory response, and genetically susceptible individuals are even more prone to these serious effects. Now, there's a lot of people who eat gluten that say, I'm gluten sensitive or I react to gluten, and they get tested and they're told you don't have a sensitivity to gluten. There's two things. One, gluten could cause a problem. Second area is you just can't break it down. It's a digestive issue. It's not an immune system issue. But either way, none of us should be eating as much gluten as we do. What I do I suggest to some of the clients I work with that say they don't have a problem with gluten, I tell them 48 hours eliminate gluten, white flour and white sugar. Just 48 hours, and at the end, for dinner, have a whole pizza, a big bowl of pasta and a beer, whatever you want, and then call me the next day and let me know how you feel. 99% of them that call, because a lot of them won't call, but the ones that do say, I couldn't believe how well I slept, how much energy I had, how clear my mind was, and how loose my pants were. And then when they ate that meal, they had to unbuckle their pants, their brain got foggy, their energy level went down. We're eating too much gluten and the whites, so our energy level every day is down here. And that becomes normal because it's there 7 days a week. It should be up here. And so when you eliminate it, you notice if you're up here and you go down to here, you know it right away. But it was a slow slide, and for 5 years I've been here. So that's my normal energy. I'm 62, I'm getting old. Energy should be down. No, it shouldn't be down. I bike ride with a group and we do some fundraising, and one of the guys is 82 years old. I now do the 50-mile rides. I've done 100-mile, I know I can do it, but it's not fun. It takes the enjoyment out of it. So I cut down to 50. He rides the 100-mile, and we all offer to pick him up. We all drive down to the start. He usually rides to the start. It's 20 miles to get to the starting line, and then 20 miles home. And he's just slow and steady. He gets to the finish point on 100 miles within a half hour of all of us, and just goes along. But he's been eating properly and just plugging along every single year. So we can do it. Getting old means you get hopefully smarter and you do things better. Not that you have to stop doing it. Okay. Last thing I'm going to talk about is nitric oxide. That nitric oxide, we think of nitric oxide, but nitric oxide on the left side of that cycle chart that I showed you, very important molecule. It's over here. This feeds into the Krebs cycle, which is our energy cycle. We need nitric oxide working. Now, if you go home and you have nothing else to do, if you look, it shows us that this has to go around and around. If this isn't working right, because we're generating too much ammonia, because we have too much homocysteine, the ammonia is causing the nitric oxide cycle not to work properly. Body always has backup systems. Backup system is BH4. It'll take 2 molecules of BH4 to break down and make 1 molecule of nitric oxide. But that means we have less of it here, so we're making less neurotransmitters, which is making more glutamate, which is anxiety producing. So what if you have a problem here to begin with, or over here that's feeding this way and affecting nitric oxide? That's using BH4, which makes this whole side collapse even further. So again, you can't just treat one of these because you saw the SNP. You have to see what's happening in the body and then put the program together. Nitric oxide, Nobel Prize for the person who discovered the nitric oxide molecule. Then down in '92, it was named the Molecule of the Year. We just think of nitric oxide as erectile function, but it has so much to do. It helps dilate blood vessels. So that's one of the ways we regulate blood pressure. So if you're not making enough nitric oxide, the blood vessels can't dilate, so it's like putting your finger on the end of a hose. It makes the pressure go up. And so very important for that. It gives us energy. And we talked about that. So I wanted to find one, and I should have had a kid do it for me, because then he would have been able to do it. I wanted to have these gears spinning and showing that all the gears have to mesh. And if this one isn't spinning right, it can affect that one. So it's not just the direct effect. And if this one isn't spinning right, it can affect this one, even though that one's okay, which affects that one. So you have to look at the whole picture. Last thing on the slides is over here I talked about BH4 to BH2. Look what BH4 does. If we have inflammation or oxidative stress, our BH4 is used in this pathway. It should be used this way to make tyrosine. Tyrosine we need for thyroid function. Dopamine, which is what we need as a neurotransmitter. 5-HTP, converting tryptophan to 5-HTP, which is used to make serotonin, which we need to make melatonin, and arginine to nitric oxide. Then it gets recycled and goes back. But to recycle the BH4, you need folic acid, methylfolate, and SAMe. So if you look on the chart, each of these is in different gears. So if one of those gears is off, it can affect all these cycles. So now I sound like Dr. Miller, a little geeky, but it's fascinating with all this data we have now. We can start seeing things that we never even knew to look at. So I gave you a copy of this. This is going to be the next big thing, and I'm just going to throw this out so you'll know the words. mTOR and autophagy. And you're going to be starting to hear a lot about that. mTOR is a process in the body for building. When you exercise, you're feeding mTOR, which helps you build. When mTOR is being stimulated, autophagy stops. Autophagy is the cleaning up of cancer cells and metabolic waste. So one of the things that stimulates mTOR is high protein. And now we're all eating protein powders and everything. We're looking at making sure we have 23 grams of protein every single meal, and we never have a vegetarian meal and take a break from the protein. So we're cutting down on the cleanup. Yes, we're building, and that's great, but there has to be, like everything, a healthy balance. So there's a lot of research going in here, and there's a lot of research going into the genes that help this and help this. And so that's going to be another big area. So people want to know, what do I do? Once we get the genetic testing back on track, we have that done. The analysis company charges $150 for a portal. You get your own portal, so your report and all the update reports are always accessible for you. The protocol will be on there. The genetic reports are on there. That's $150. If you work with me, I charge $150 an hour. So we get the data, and we get all your labs put in there and analyze it, and then we meet as we need to, come up with a protocol and move forward. It's teamwork. It's something that it's not take this and you're cured. It's take this and we're cleaning up the mess and getting you going. Eventually, I hope you just come in and say, I feel great, thanks, and just stop in. But it is a work in progress, so that just gives you a little bit on the finance side.